What are indiscriminate attacks under international humanitarian law? Imagine a war zone where bombs fall without warning, hitting everything in sight. It's a chaotic scene where civilians can get caught in the crossfire, often with tragic results. This is what we call an indiscriminate attack. These attacks are a serious concern under international humanitarian law because they threaten the safety of civilians and violate key rules of warfare. International humanitarian law, which is also known as the law of armed conflict, aims to limit the effects of war. One of its main principles is the principle of distinction. This rule says that parties involved in a conflict must tell the difference between military targets and civilians or civilian property. When this rule is ignored, civilians can suffer greatly. Indiscriminate attacks happen when military actions do not distinguish between combatants and civilians. For example, firing blindly into a populated area or using weapons that spread over wide areas without targeting specific military objectives. Weapons like cluster munitions or landmines can cause harm over large zones, making it impossible to avoid civilian casualties. Sometimes, attacks on multiple military targets are treated as one big target in crowded areas, leading to more civilian harm. There are also attacks called disproportionate attacks. These occur when the expected civilian damage is much higher than the military advantage gained. For instance, if a military strike causes more civilian casualties than the military gain justifies, it is considered disproportionate and illegal under international law. The legal rules against indiscriminate attacks are clear. They are written into the Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols, especially the first one from 1977. These laws are part of what is called customary international humanitarian law, which applies in all types of conflicts. If someone commits an indiscriminate attack, they could be charged with war crimes under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Commanders and soldiers have a duty to plan their operations carefully. They must choose precise targets and use weapons that can be directed at specific military objectives. They should also take all possible precautions to avoid harming civilians. If there is a risk that an attack could cause excessive civilian harm, it should be canceled or postponed. Civilians and their homes are protected under international humanitarian law. Even when attacking a legitimate military target, parties must consider the potential civilian harm and avoid disproportionate damage. Indiscriminate attacks break this protection because they do not limit harm to civilians and their property. In practice, armed forces need to plan their operations with care. They should use accurate weapons and avoid tactics that are inherently indiscriminate, especially in populated areas. Constant assessment of the military advantage versus civilian harm is necessary. If the harm looks too high, the attack should be stopped. To sum up, indiscriminate attacks are those that do not tell the difference between military targets and civilians. They can happen by accident or design, but both are against international law. These attacks violate core principles meant to keep civilians safe during war. Protecting civilians means respecting these rules and making sure military actions are precise and justified.